发展离不开世界，世界发展也需要中国。经过改革开放40多年不懈努力，和社会长期稳定两大奇迹。
The whole Congress is so scripted and so formulaic, frankly, and so boring that people are looking for anything interesting.
The next 5 years in China will be a continuation of what we've seen in the last year or two.
The Central Committee of the Communist Party of China has elected Xi Jinping as its General Secretary for another 5-year term. That's not all. Xi was also reappointed as the head of China's Central Military Commission. The 69-year-old is now all but certain to sail through to a third term as China's president, due to be formally announced during the government's annual legislative sessions in March. Since becoming the country's leader a decade ago, Xi has achieved a concentration of power like no modern Chinese ruler, with the exception of Mao Zedong.
同意的代表请举手。
4 years ago, Xi abolished the presidential 2-term limit, paving the way for him to govern indefinitely. His anointment came after a week-long Congress of 2,300 hand-picked party delegates, during which they endorsed Xi's core position in the leadership and approved a sweeping reshuffle that saw former rivals step down. Amid all this, there was one incident that left everyone stunned, exposing the rising power of Xi Jinping. On the 22nd of October, during the closing ceremony of the 20th Party Congress, something unexpected happened. As soon as the event was open to foreign news reporters, the cameras caught the unceremonious exit of the former Chinese president, Hu Jintao. Hu was lifted and removed from his seat as Xi Jinping cemented his historic third term. If you see the video, you can see Hu reaching for a red folder on the desk in front of him. The 79-year-old former president was seen speaking to National People's Congress Chairman Li Zhanshu, who appeared to take the former president's file of papers in a red folder away from him. Moments later, Hu, who was seated to the left of current Chinese President Xi Jinping, was led off the stage in the main auditorium of the Great Hall of the People in Beijing by 2 stewards. Chinese media outlet Xinhua reported that Hu had been feeling unwell, an explanation that has been met with skepticism by the critics. What exactly happened? Why did Xi Jinping not stand up for Hu Jintao?
The person to Hu Jintao's immediate left looked like he, partially stood up or, was going to help, but very, very quickly sat down when Xi Jinping's, aides looked like they were really going to remove Hu Jintao. I think the other, members sitting there were quite frozen, perhaps, praying that they were not next. This was clearly orchestrated because most of the meeting was behind closed doors. It wasn't open to the international media. But right when the international media was allowed to cover the meeting, the world, well, it's funny, it wasn't shown in China, but the rest of the world saw Hu Jintao being, led out. So, that was orchestrated.
Soon after, the Chinese Foreign Ministry evaded a journalist's question about the former president's sudden exit at a regular media briefing.
A question from Reuters. A number of international observers and experts observed that former Chinese President Hu Jintao was unexpectedly escorted out of the Great Hall of the People during the closing ceremony of the 20th Party Congress on Saturday. What happened, and why did Mr. Hu leave at this point? Thank you.
这不是一个外交问题，既然你提到了，我注意到新华网记者已经发布了有关的信息，你可以查阅，如果感兴趣的话。
Interestingly, the entire coverage was heavily censored by China's domestic media. In fact, to date, no media outlet in China has mentioned it at all. Official news broadcasters provided no close-up of his empty seat, and to a Chinese audience, it would appear that Mr. Hu had remained at the closing ceremony, whereas he was escorted out. On one side, social media around the world was abuzz with the shocking exit of Hu, but it was highly censored on Chinese social media platforms. Hu Jintao served as General Secretary of the CCP Central Committee for a decade, from 2002 to 2012, preceded by Jiang Zemin and succeeded by Xi Jinping. Although Hu was Xi's immediate predecessor, he has had no real power in the party for the past decade. Experts have indicated that faction politics in the Chinese Communist Party could be the reason behind Xi's latest acts. Was Mr. Hu purged in one of the most opaque party systems in the world?
Hu Jintao, who is the former head of the Communist Party, the former head of state, was the head of the Chinese Youth League faction of the Communist Party, which is different from the Shanghai faction, of which Xi originally belonged, and then Xi splintered off and made his own faction. So there are factional politics within the Communist Party. And it appears that Xi Jinping was signaling very publicly and loudly that he was not going to tolerate factional divisions in his next 5 years. And I mean, there's no way that Hu Jintao is a threat to Xi Jinping. Hu Jintao is elderly, his day is past, but his faction still has members. And by the way, in China, the Chinese Communist Party's new standing committee, there are no members of the China Youth League faction. So Xi Jinping is saying there's not going to be dissenting voices, and here is how I'm going to let you all know it.
The incident has sparked debate about the current power play in Beijing. With more authority given to Xi now, let's take a look into how the Chinese president will handle key issues China is facing. In the past 10 years, Chinese diplomacy has dramatically changed. It became coercive, confrontational, and combative. This aggressive style of diplomacy is called wolf warrior diplomacy. The term is inspired by the Chinese action film Wolf Warrior. With 5 more years to go, many China watchers expect more of the aggressive diplomacy that has alienated Beijing from the West on various issues.
In this new journey, China's diplomacy will continue to carry forward our fighting spirit, increase the abilities of our fighting spirit, and always standing at the forefront of safeguarding national interests and national dignity.
最前线。
In the last decade, Chinese diplomats have aimed jarring insults and threats at various countries and territories, including India, Australia, and the United States, and this trend is expected to continue. In fact, just after the Hu Jintao incident, the world witnessed a classic of the wolf warrior diplomacy when Wang Wenbin, spokesperson of the Ministry of Chinese Foreign Affairs, evaded the question asked by an international journalist about the former president's shocking exit. Going forward, one can see more aggressive tactics in the next 5 years.
It's been more than 70 years, and if there's going to be war, there would be one by now. The Chinese communists have a lot of domestic issues they need to deal with. They have a lot on their hands now. I don't think they have the time for Taiwan.
From the way Hu Jintao was escorted out of the party congress, we know that Xi Jinping is very autocratic and his team very hardliner. He's not afraid of the United States or the European Union. He has no fear. I think the Taiwanese need to think closely and be prepared for the war. But no one can say for sure when that's going to happen.
These are the sentiments of the Taiwanese as soon as Xi Jinping secured his third term. Taiwan is bolstering its defenses and gearing itself up for the possibility of war with China as Xi gets another 5 years. The Chinese president has made no secret of his desire to make democratically ruled Taiwan a part of the People's Republic of China. And he sent out a clear message even during the 20th Communist Party Congress.
面对台独势力分裂活动和外部势力干涉台湾事务的严重挑衅，我们坚决开展反分裂、反干涉重大斗争，展示了我们维护国家主权和领土完整、反对台独的坚强决心和强大能力。
China's war games near Taiwan in August pushed tensions to their highest in decades after US Speaker Nancy Pelosi's controversial visit to the island. Her trip reignited fears of the conflict that has loomed large ever since the defeated Republic of China government fled to the island in 1949 after losing a civil war to Mao Zedong's communists. And now the fear of a sudden Taiwan invasion has just increased. With the elevation of loyalists to the top ranks of the Chinese Communist Party, will there be anyone who can stop Xi Jinping if he takes the decision to attack the island?
So I do think that in the next 5 years, it will be more intense for the cross-strait relations. It will be more unstable, and also it will be more the tensions across Taiwan Strait will be escalated to a different level. So, and also you can see that his policies right now, he has made it very clear that he is going to pursue the so-called Great Chinese Rejuvenation as the most important goal for his leadership. And it's also it will also become his legacy for his ruling of China.
Well, look, for China, Taiwan is absolutely the first priority. China is very worried about Taiwan. They're worried about the United States and worried about Japan and other allies of the United States. This is really a matter of speculation, I think. I mean, he's made it clear that like all Chinese leaders, that Taiwan is part of China, but is he really willing to pull the trigger? And, you know, on the one hand, the Ukraine war seems to suggest to anybody how costly war can be, and that wars often don't go the way they're planned, for sure. On the other hand, Taiwan is much smaller than Ukraine, and China's military budget is 4 to 5 times that of Russia's.
The week-long Congress underscored the importance of the army and the need to keep its morale high. 3 People's Liberation Army generals who had played key roles in the Western Theater Command bordering India have received promotions. This is significant. All 3 generals were actively involved during a period of heightened tensions spanning the 2017 Doklam crisis and the line of actual control crisis that began in April 2020. And then this video was played out on the opening day of the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China. According to reports, a video showcasing CPC's feats was screened in which the clip of the Galwan clashes were played out. In June 2020, a savage brawl broke out between Indian and Chinese forces. Troops clashed on ridges at nearly 14,000 feet. The fighting resulted in the deaths of 20 Indian soldiers. 43 Chinese soldiers were also reportedly killed. It was the deadliest clash in 45 years. It led to a months-long military standoff. Not only was the clip played as part of China's achievements under Xi Jinping, but the Chinese military commander, Xi Fabao, who was involved in the conflict on the ground, was among the 304 delegates from the PLA. Earlier this year, Fabio was chosen as the torchbearer at the Beijing Winter Olympics, prompting India to announce a diplomatic boycott of the Games. The emphasis on the role of the PLA may well be intended as a message to India, but also to Taiwan and the countries rooting for Taiwan.
India is part of the Quad, and so that is the United States, Japan, Australia, and India. And China is very, very concerned about the Quad actually taking shape. Right now it's a concept, it's a security concept. And so China will certainly seek to either undermine India as a U.S. security partner, and I anticipate that foreign relations going forward will be tricky.
Under Xi Jinping's 10-year rule, China has been accused of repression of minorities, crackdown on protests, and gross violations of human rights. Be it suppression of protests in Hong Kong, detention and torture of Uyghurs in the Xinjiang Autonomous Region, curbing freedom of expression, widespread arbitrary detentions, the violations of rights and freedoms is only increasing. Critics fear that the worst is yet to come. Amnesty International declared Xi's continued tenure as leader a disaster for human rights.
The situation will not become better for the Uyghurs, for Chinese minorities, for even Christians and Catholics and religious minorities in China that are persecuted and prosecuted. There is very little opposition to Xi Jinping's agenda in China regarding human rights, and by him getting at least 5 more years, there will be no challenge to that record.
Xi's loyalists in the party have sparked fears that economic growth will be sacrificed for ideology-driven policies. And the proof of it was this. onshore yuan fell to its weakest level in 15 years on October 24th. It slipped to as low as 7.2790 per dollar, near its record low. Shares of many companies dropped significantly after Xi unveiled his new team. Shares of e-commerce giants Alibaba, JD.com, as well as internet behemoth Baidu crashed between 14 and 17%.
Looking at the economy, Xi Jinping looks as if he's willing to sacrifice economic growth for economic stability, and in particular for a greater role for the party state in the economy. We will see a lot more government control of the economy. We may see foreign businesses leaving China. Some will stay. It's still a huge market. So it's going to be very difficult, I think, for foreign countries to deal with China with Xi Jinping at the helm and demanding so much control and so much that other countries essentially obey China.
China's economy has been slowing down due to a zero-COVID strategy and weakening global demand. The country continues to persist with lockdowns in many cities over a handful of infections. Can Xi revive China's economy now?
I think, honestly, probably the harshest human rights situation in China lately has been the pandemic lockdowns, and a lot of Chinese are angry about that, unquestionably. And Chinese, when you're locked down like that, you feel that your freedom is impinged upon. So I do think many Chinese are kind of thirsting for an end to pandemic lockdowns, for sure. So we'd like to see China open up and embrace that kind of cosmopolitan, openness to the world, mixing with foreigners and so forth that we've seen in China for a long time. So we'll see if that develops. I think it might. I think China thirsts for that, and even Xi Jinping and the CCP leadership understand that that's essential for the future of China.
The next 5 years are very important for China's growth. With more power comes more accountability. Having hand-picked his leadership team and got the party constitution amended to enshrine Xi's authorities and ideas as its core, Xi Jinping has a free hand to make and implement policy for better or worse. That means that if things backfire, it may be harder to shift the blame. But will Xi Jinping take responsibility for any failure? That's the biggest risk confronting China and its Communist Party, with one helmsman wielding unprecedented power and authority.